Hi, welcome. I'd like to welcome you back to my extensive breakdown series. Again, I'm putting this out on my Rumble channel as I, fill in the gaps and provide some clarity, context to this conversation between Robert Cabral, balanced dog trainer, very popular on social media, and the president of the International Association of Canine Professionals. And again, there's been so much controversy, even Zach George chiming in on the association in terms of, adversive tools. And so here, as I go through here, again, using this as a foundation by way of going through some of the narratives here, adding to the conversation. So I'm going to continue to play this as I go through and respond to it.
Point. We're not raising children the way we did 30 years ago either.
Mm-hmm.
Not to get too deep into that,
Yeah,
but
no, I agree with you.
again, we're not raising kids the way we did 30 years ago. And
Again, last video I mentioned this briefly about this whole, again, how balanced dog trainers will bring up certain examples, but they lack depth, okay? Because, you're dealing with this superficial idea as to what a process is. It doesn't recognize what this social connection represents by way of how a dog's decision-making process is governed. It doesn't tie in properly. So there's almost like, and you get these balanced dog trainers, they have a sense of things. This is why some of them will, have a sense of, well, I'm not going to use treats at a certain level, or not going. But there's no real identifying really the depth of the problem here. Okay, there's always a sense of something, But see, again, I talk about this when you get into this whole thing about truly identifying what the problem is. This goes right to the heart of the issue. I mentioned this before years ago in Canada. Now here's probably the best example is when I was, offered to sit down alongside those who advocate clicker training. It's not just about clicker training, it's about this idea that approaching a relationship problem is a learning-based exercise. When I was invited to sit along some clicker trainers to have come alongside, work together by way of a very large veterinarian clinic, I refused, outright refused, and I didn't do it in a nasty way. In fact, I had discussion with the individual as to why. At the time, I was involved actually the Humane Society was using me at that time for dogs, was tied into other vet clinics, and so I've been on the news, so my name's out there, but I refused. But that's it. See, that's right there. That's the difference. But here's the difference: balanced dog trainers, not only do they share a meal with these individuals and have a conversation, they use they align with the exact same idea of things, the exact same concepts. That's why you ask a balanced dog trainer, like, what's your idea of training? Oh, well, clicker train. Oh, we use clickers. We use food. Why do you think they do it? Because they jump in the exact same way as force-free trainers in terms of relationship problem. They motivate dogs to respond while assuming that those responses can be trusted, that the perception of dogs are changing. And my response is, well, based on what exactly? Like, what's the criteria? Think about that. Answer the question. What's the criteria these trainers are using to define or establish that the perception of dogs are changing the right way as the dogs are responding and going into a sit or a down? Like, what's their criteria? Like people should ask, like, what is it? Beyond just appearances, what are you using to establish that? They can't answer. They won't respond. They can't answer it. Because the criteria is the very criteria I talk about, influence and control, defining in terms of revealing and change, but reconciled through a process that takes a path of a interaction-based approach. See, they're done. They can't, and so it's the same thing that force-free trainers are doing, just that balanced dog trainers will bring influence in at a certain point when they decide, right, that a dog's at a certain level and when the dog's expressing a high level of control. And go watch the Larry Crone video I did where he's doing a seminar with this aggressive, Rottweiler. It's a perfect example. Like, you just have to go through my series and just watch it, and because everything I say is consistent throughout. I show example after example after example of these trainers, the fact they're not dialed in that way, the right way at all. And so you get all these, superficial statements where they have like a sense that they try to frame it up a certain way, but they're done. There's no, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
And we've over the last several decades have taken this very different approach to how we raise kids. And I think people truly believe that the same systems can be applied to dogs
Mhm.
because they truly do believe that dogs should be an equal member of the family, just like all the other humans that are in the family.
See, I'm all for like the whole thing of treating a dog fairly. Like I don't like a lot of what I see in dog training. I don't like.
So here we go. So pay attention to Robert Cabral. Talk about the wishy-washy, right? It's this whole double-minded fence riding. That's how I see balanced dog trainers is as balanced, right? Like walking the fence, but they're playing both sides, right? So but if you're looking through the right lens here, and you start to pay attention to how they frame stuff up, they're playing all sides, even in these discussions. It's like this exception clause. Well, kind of like it, but they just back and
Like a
forth.
lot of what I see in the sports. Like I think like my dog sleeps, our dogs both sleep in our beds, in our bed. They're with us all the time. My dog eats the best food. I treat my dog very, very humanely, contrary to what you'd hear on the internet. I mean, yeah, I use an e-collar. I use a prong collar, but I use it so rarely. I'll tell you what I see on this, Jason. I see.
See, talk about the exception that rarely, right? So that ties into this thing about for some dogs, or because balanced dog trainers, they're in a reactive posture, so they'll apply certain tools when control is manifesting at a level in which they're dialed in, because understand they're reactive. So they're delayed, they're reactionary. See, that's the problem here. It's like they're trying to have this kind of exception clause saying, okay, we want to have our cake and eat it too. Some dogs, see, and this is the same trap. You go watch the Jamie Penrith video. It's again a great illustration of the trap they're in. Right from the moment he enters that studio, okay, he's sitting down with, he's having a debate with a anti remote collar individual, but you just see things leading right up to the pivotal moment where even the host, right, saying, well, hold on here a second. Like the dog's trust person says, we show that you don't need to use those tools for the dog running out into the traffic. Like Penn was trying to say, well, for some dogs, but see, that's the problem is it doesn't tie in. It's like, because it's not reconciled. It's not specific in the way I described that they're able to, when I talk about an express state, when I talk about control manifesting and influence interrupting that express state based on a relationship problem, how control is manifesting. Bounce houses, they don't talk that way. Okay, they don't identify influence its role that way. You're right. So this is why when you get this thing about shifting a dog's focus, using treats, and this is where that individual on the Good Morning Britain show says, well, we can get the dog to make a different choice. So you get this thing about free will and choice, right? This thing about choice is changing the focus. But again, I use the same, when I talk about the selfish child example, it's be like a child mouthing off at the parent, and suddenly the parent just pulls out a chocolate bar and, holds it to the side, shifting focus. And in that moment, the child's not mouthing off, but their focus, their attention is directed towards what they want, the chocolate bar, and then trying to frame that up as, oh, that's a good moment. You see, it doesn't take in the factor in about the relationship that you're dealing with, the relationship problem, the child, the parental role tying it in that way, or even parental influence, how that would be, tied into that moment, in terms of, the engagement with the parent-child relationship properly, to say, hey, to actually for influence to be defined to actually affect, okay, the child's, attitude. Now, I'm not saying, again, this is where people get into this thing about being over the top, right? And, I talk about parenting styles, permissive, authoritative, authoritarian. And see, you'll see these trainers too, and this happened with the anti-dog trainer. We start talking about, because again, there's so much confusion, because understand that they're not, critical thinking is not applied here at all with these trainers to say, well, they'll just take it to the authoritarian side. Because you get into the specifics as to, the role of influence by way of control manifesting in that moment, right? They don't identify its role that way. So you get certain reactions of dogs, from influence coming into a certain moment. They'll take it to the street, right? They'll label abuse because that's where the rubber meets the road. They haven't come out on the other side. They aren't able to reconcile that. The reactions of dogs properly to the relationship. That's where you get into the problem here. So because their kind of default setting is to, right, is to affect the dog's focus through, say, using treats, um, something else. They're trying to change the movement. You see, anti-dog training, they move forward, right? They're trying to affect change that way. I talk about the problems with that, in terms of the dog's perceptions, the dog's level of investment, control manifesting. Okay, you'll see the big difference there. So you get into the nuts and bolts of it. That's where the sparks start flying for a reason. They're gonna fly. I mean, I already know that. So, and this is where you have these balanced dog trainers labeling things as abuse, right? So here you hear, pay attention to Robert Cabral. He's walking along, like he's like, see, and that's the problem. If you really pay attention to these trainers, how they talk, they're very intentional. They're so cautious with how they're talking because it's like they know they're in a trap already. And so they don't want to lose the script. So they're very cautious. It's like a prepared statement, like they're reading from a script. It's like they're so careful in their delivery, with what they're saying, because that's their only way out, or they think it's a way out. It's not working. Okay. But they're trying to compromise. They're always trying to find a compromise position here. They're trying to compromise. Well, that only takes you so far, because the force-free movement isn't going to allow that. They want you down on your knees to this. Understand that there's no way out. Sooner or later, this is what happens. Because they've come into agreement with this ideology, and when you do that, you're finished, right? Because you've boxed yourself in. You can't do that. I mean, you can do it, but it's not going to work out.
See something that is really interesting, that these mono view organizations, it's a huge push for money. It's a money grab.
See, so he's doing the same thing. So he goes into this whole thing about radicalization, money grab, but he won't go into the actual specifics of the role. Because if I was to have a conversation with Robert Cabral, we're going to get into it, 30 seconds in, because we're going to get into identifying the process itself. See, because that's where it's at. See, that you have to identify the problem here. So, what they're doing is they play a shell game here. That's what these balanced dog trainers do. They're like saying, basically saying, hey, I want to do what I want to do. I want to be left alone. Like in my heart, I have the best interests of dogs at heart, and so I should be able to do it my way, and I shouldn't be questioned on anything. And that's not, you can only get away with that for so long. I mean, that's what's happening here. This is what these trainers are trying to do.
Right? They can tell you anybody who doesn't do what we do, it's a very cult-like mentality, is bad, is evil, is abusive, is
See, so he goes right there. So he will trying to play the victim. Now, right away, right, trying to put that victim card down. You can't do. I mean, you can try that. It's not gonna work for long. See, this is what's happening. This is why this is all crumbling, because these trainers are trying. So right here, he's like saying, well, we shouldn't be taking heat. We shouldn't be. Well, then explain yourself. Like, I put the information out. Like, then you're gonna, sooner or later, push comes to shove, you're gonna have to justify, the use of those tools and your idea about influence within a process that doesn't work. It doesn't fit. Like, it's like trying to take a square peg and push it into a round hole. It doesn't fit. See, that's what these balanced dog trainers, they don't get, not yet, but they're getting kicked off the fence. They're losing their tools, but they're trying to make it work out. It can't. Once you understand the dynamics of this ideology and what it represents, like, you have to apply critical thinking here. You see where it doesn't fit. I mean, I keep going back to the Jamie Penrith. I would really encourage anyone, go watch. It's on my YouTube channel. It's a Good Morning Britain, and it's part of my Flipping the Script series. I go through, I respond to, I just take it right up to that moment. Even the hosts turn on Penrith, right? It's like saying, well, we're not convinced. Well, see, it's like, it's a trap. It's a trap. It's like Star Wars. Was it the Return of the Jedi? The guy's like saying that, one of the, rebel leaders says, it's a trap. It's a trap. And they're in it.
Is a white supremacist, is a Nazi. These are all things I've been called, and I think it's a money.
See, he's talking about white supremacy. And so, yeah, you see Zach George out there going this ideological slippery slope. Because that's the whole thing. Like, if the truth is subjective, right, this is where that statement comes from. There's more than one way to train a dog. That doesn't even make sense. Like, anyone who makes that statement is confused and part of this rigged game. Right? I mean, when you, in the light of the information I'm putting out, that statement takes on an entirely different meaning. There's more than one way to train a dog, because when you consider it's all based on appearances, superficial response, of course these trainers are going to say that there's more than one way, but what does that even mean? Right? And then the truth is subjective. So this is why Zach George bringing in all these ideological, going down the ideological slippery slope, talk about toxic masculinity and all these other things he's bringing in. Well, of course it's all going to come in, because it's not about the truth. But then for balanced dog training, it's not about the truth either that way. It's a joke. So let's stop it here for part 5, okay, as we go through this conversation. I'm not going to go and respond to all of it. I'm 10 minutes in. I'm just unpacking quite a bit here and using it as a guide for those who are interested. So again, I encourage you, if you're looking for answers, you're not going to find them in the balanced dog training side of things. You're not going to find them definitely force-free or play-based, quasi Cesar Millan type of ideology. This is why this has been going on and on and on. So I put out information. I'm very specific as to what represents a process, why all the confusion, why all the divisiveness. Check out my website of lots of great information. If you're a dog owner, I'm here helping dogs and owners the right way, the right information. Problem here is so many people are failing, and they don't even have a chance, even if they want it, to succeed. They get bad information right from, because as soon as you're told it's a learning-based exercise, for a lot of people, you're done. You're not going to be able to generate what needs to be generated to reverse course. Understand that. As soon as you encounter a balanced, force-free dog trainer and play bait these trainers, forget it. Because influence and control aren't going to come in the way that they need to have that right conversation, as I call it, between you and your dog. You're finished. And then what these trainers do, they just move on. It's like, well, this must be something wrong with the dog. All the excuses on the planet. That's how this is set up. Understand, this is a rigged game. And all these trainers are part of it. You talk about the International Association of Canine Professionals, you'll never hear them even whisper what the real problem is. They can't talk about it. They'll eat lots of great steak and have some beer or whatever, tell some jokes, pat each other on the back. Forget it. It's a joke. All these associations, never going to hear them talk about whisper the real problem. Meanwhile, the dog training world is a complete, train wreck. It's a joke. It's like the worst example of just how corrupt something can become because of the human. Okay, this isn't a dog problem. This is a human problem, and and this is all these. You can just circle the whole wagon system here. It's a Ponzi scheme. It goes right through even the vets, dog trainers. They're all making money off of it at the expense of dogs. It's just the collateral damage of this is unbelievable. And this has been going on since the beginning. Just from the beginning. Just how bad it is. It's entrenched. But thanks for watching. Stay tuned for part 6 coming up here soon.